Good evening, everyone, and thanks for watching. I'm Katie Moore.
And I'm Sharice Gibson. So we'll have more on the death of Charlie Kirk in just a moment, but we are following breaking news of the federal charges against New Orleans Mayor Cantrell.
Yeah, Chief Investigative Reporter David Hammer beginning our team coverage tonight here in the studio. David?
Yeah, Katie and Sharice, Mayor Cantrell pleaded not guilty to 11 counts of conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and false statements to a grand jury. The government says it was to cover up an alleged affair with her bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappy. It was another historic day for the city. For the first time, a sitting mayor of New Orleans had to make the walk into the federal courthouse through the gauntlet of reporters and cameras. The usually fiery mayor was almost dour as she walked into court, only stopping to make sure a cameraman who fell was okay. Former federal prosecutor Matt Chester, who helped convict former Mayor Ray Nagin, said the charges she faces are serious.
Certainly at its core, there's an affair here that's being alleged by the grand jury, but there is a lot of conduct above and beyond the affair. There is allegations of giving false statements to the FBI. There's allegations of submitting false affidavits to a grand jury. And of course, the government here has tied the affair to monies that were paid out by the city for Officer Vappy's protection. So a little too simplistic to say this is just about affair. Certainly that's a big part of it, but it's really more about the process. The government would say this is more about the processes that these defendants undertook to hide that affair, which themselves are alleged violations of the law.
Now, Mayor Cantrell was also reserved and formal inside the courtroom, telling Magistrate Judge Karen Wells-Roby that she understood the charges against her and the penalties if convicted. If she is convicted, she could face up to 20 years in prison on several of the counts, but that's a long way down the road. A trial date was set for November, but that will definitely be pushed back. More immediately, she had to turn in her passport today. She can only travel outside Southeast Louisiana with approval from the federal government, but she is allowed to continue in office and can even speak to potential witnesses who work for the city, as long as she doesn't talk about the case.
Yeah,
Sharice?
the restrictions in our conversations and the passport are some things that caught us by surprise, David. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Well, at the center of the charges in Cantrell's travel, as we just talked about, the indictment alleges that she and her former bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappy, they cost the city thousands in trips.
Yeah, Alyssa Curtis started looking into those travel costs as it become a point of contention between her and the city council, and she spent the last few years reporting on that rocky relationship between the council and the mayor. So, Alyssa, what's the latest?
Yeah, Katie, Sharice, earlier this year, the council tried to ban the mayor from taking trips. A judge eventually blocked the council's efforts. Also, back in 2022, the mayor had to pay the city nearly $30,000 after she upgraded several flights to first class. The mayor's travel is just one example of the turbulent relationship between her and the council. The two branches spent months at odds because of the city-owned Pontalba apartment. UNO political science professor Ed Shervanack says the tension is leading to a perception that City Hall is just not working.
These are two institutions that are sharing power, and so they need to agree before anything can really happen, and that means compromise by both of the branches of government. And if they don't agree, and if they can't agree, then nothing gets done. And so that's why we need at least some measure of cooperation and compromise between the city council and the mayoral administration.
And as David said, she can't travel outside of the region without a judge's permission. Whoever the next mayor is will have to decide what the future of mayoral travel looks like.
All right, thanks so much, Alyssa. The relationship between Cantrell and her former bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappy, that is at the center of this set of indictments.
Investigative reporter Mike Pearlstein joining us now in studio with more. And Mike, we talked about this a little bit earlier, those restrictions on the mayor. How was she going to convene, and obviously still a sitting mayor, how was she going to do city business with these restrictions placed on her?
Well, it was clear from the magistrate judge that she is allowed to speak to city employees as long as she doesn't talk about this case and the facts of this case. What is unclear is whether those restrictions would apply to a co-defendant, in this case Jeffrey Vappy, her former police bodyguard.
Now that relationship is at the heart of all of this. He's set to be arraigned on Friday. So what do we expect out of that?
Well, it will probably run very similar to what we saw today, which is pretty perfunctory at a magistrate, in this case, first appearance on these new charges for Jeffrey Vappy. He can only enter a not guilty plea at a first appearance. If there are any additional bond conditions, they're unlikely because he was free on bond previously when it was 8 counts against him. Now it's 15, but he's obviously done everything required, so it's likely that he will keep the same bond conditions. What is interesting to point out here is that while he was expected to be arraigned in his first appearance today alongside of Cantrell, that was postponed merely because of a scheduling conflict with one of the attorneys. This case is in no way severed. They are still indicted as co-defendants, and it is my understanding, talking to various attorneys involved, that there is not a split as far as their defense is concerned, that they are standing by their not guilty pleas. We're going to hear not guilty again on Friday from Vappy, and he will obviously have the same timetable as the mayor as far as pretrial and a trial date, which was set for November, but we know that that is very, very unlikely to happen.
You mentioned that earlier. Also, something we'll talk about a little bit later, another federal suit filed against the city of New Orleans from a whistleblower that David Hammer exclusively interviewed. Of course, we'll have more about that at 6.
A lot going on.
All right, a lot going on. Mike, thank you so much. And we'll have continuing coverage of the case as the federal trial moves forward. Look for the updates on our website, our free smartphone app, as well as our social media pages.
All right.